I hope that you are well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 4 English lesson on adjectives that compare. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of language arts, grade 4. And then we're going to scroll down up until we get to our chapter of adjectives that compare. All right. So our chapter is adjectives that compare. Our subject is English language arts. Grade 4. And the lessons that we're going to be focusing on under the chapter of adjectives that compare. It is to use adjectives that compare and to use adjectives with more and most. All right. So we in our previous lesson, we also did adjectives that compare. But now we're mainly going to focus on adjectives with more and most. So this is basically a continuation of our previous lesson on adjectives that compare. All right. So when it comes to adjectives that compare, right, you can use some adjectives to compare. We can compare people, we can compare places, we can compare things, right? So when we compare people, right, or places or things, we can, with adjectives that compare, we have comparative adjective and we have superlative adjective. So when it comes to comparative adjectives, right? Comparative adjectives, it compares two people, to places or things. So for example, we have comparative adjectives, and comparative adjectives, right? It compares to people, to places, or to things, right? And when we compare adjectives, right, with comparative adjectives, they end in er. So which means that our adjective is going to end in er. All right. Then we also have superlative adjectives, right? And superlative adjectives, they compare people, they compare, actually, they compare more than two people, places, or things. All right. So once again, we can say that we can use some adjectives to compare people, places, or things, and we have comparative adjectives and we have superlative adjectives. We said comparative adjective compare two people, places, or things, and they end in er. And our superlative adjectives, they compare more than two people, places, or things, right? And they end in E is T. If we look at an example of a comparative adjective, right, that compares to people, places, or things, then we can say, for example, it says, he is taller than his sister. So, which means that taller is our comparative adjectives and it compares basically him to his sister because we're saying that he is taller than his sister, right? So they're comparing the two in height. Or we can turn it around and we can say his sister is shorter than him, right? So then we still say, for example, our word still ends in er, or let's say our adjective still ends in er. Then we have a superlative adjective that compare more than two people, places, or things, right? And it ends in est. For example, it says he is the tallest person in his class. Now we're comparing him to more than two people, right? Or more than one person. So if we're comparing him to the rest of the class, then we can say he is the tallest person in his class. He's the tallest person on the squad. He's the tallest person um, amongst his friends, right? And it ends with est. If we look at our activity over here, it says our dog Bailey had the fur of all the dogs in the dog show. Well, listen, before we go to that one, let us first quickly go to aplusstudents.ca. Then we'll come back to this activity, right? So we're going to A plus students first, and then we'll come back to this activity. So we're going to use the adjectives that compare. All right. And we said we have comparative adjectives and superlative adjectives, right? Comparative adjectives that compares two people, and the superlative adjectives that compares more than two people. All right, so now if we look at this activity over here, right? Then it says, my dad takes the showers of anyone in the family. Are we going to say my dad takes the quicker shower, or do we say he takes the quickest shower? So we're going to say dad takes the quicker shower, or do we say dad takes the quickest shower? And dad is being compared to anyone in the family, to the rest of the family. Which one is the correct one? My dad takes the quickest showers of anyone in the family, or my dad takes the quickest shower of anyone in the family. Dad is being compared to basically anyone or everyone in the family. All right, and if I select the correct one, we can then say that dad takes the quickest shower. So well done, Prayan. Dad takes we're going to put, I'm going to put the answer over here. Dad takes the quickest, and it ends in est, showers of anyone in the family. And that is a superlative adjective because dad is being compared to more than two other people in the house, basically. Right? So quickest is the correct word. So well done. All right. Do you think that Shakespeare was do we say the greater writer, or Do you think he was the greatest writer? Do we say he was the greater writer or he was the greatest writers of them all? Of all writers. So yes, Shakespeare is also being compared to all of the writers. So is that going to be a comparative adjective or a superlative adjective? Is our answer going to be a greater writer or greatest writer? All right. And if we select the correct answer, we can say, do you think that Shakespeare was the greatest writer of all writers, right? Because here, Shakespeare is being compared to all writers, which means that it is more than two other writers, right? So we use the greatest because our adjective it ends in est, and that is a superlative adjective. And then we need to complete the sentence with the correct form of adjective. The Harden family's enormous house was the. Do we say that the Harden's family was their house was the grander house than anybody's house or the grandest house or the grandest house in the city, the greatest of all time. So, do we say that the Harden family's enormous house was the grander house in one city, or the grandest in one in the house in the city? So now this is being compared to literally all of the houses in the city, basically. So do we say it's grander or grandest? All right. So if we select our correct adjective, then we will say the grandest because it's a superlative adjective because the Harden family's enormous house is being compared to literally everybody's in the whole city. So we can say that their house was the grandest. This is a superlative adjective and it ends with est. Right? So well done. Well done. Now we're going on to our test, right? Where we're going to use adjectives to compare. We need to complete the sentence with the correct form of the adjective. It says, when Devin was in the hospital, Nurse Alvarado was a lot, do we say a lot kinder than Dr. Kerr or a lot kindest than Dr. Kerr? Is it option one, kinder than Dr. Kerr or kindest than Dr. Kerr or Care? All right. If we select the correct one, we can say that Nurse Alvarado was a lot kinder than Dr. Kerr because Nurse Alvarado is being compared to Dr. Kerr. That means that it is a comparative adjective and it ends in ER. So kinder. So well done. Kinder or number one is correct. All right, we need to complete the sentence with the correct form of adjective. The animal shelter has a. Do they have a greater need for dog beds than for cat beds? Or they have a greatest need for dog beds than for cat beds? So the animal shelter has a greater need for dog beds than for cat beds? Or do we say the animal shelter has a greatest need for dog beds than for cat beds? All right. So over here, right, they're saying that the animal shelter has a greater need, has a need, right, for dog beds than cat beds, right, which means that we are comparing the amount of dog beds to cat beds, right? So this is not going to be a bit tricky because they're specifically only making mention of the one animal shelter, but that either is and they're comparing the dog beds to the cat beds or wanting that, right? So we are going to choose one of this and then we're just going to see which one is correct, right? So what we're going to do is if we read this again, right, it says the animal shelter has, usually if we were to say it has a, then we would say it is has a greater need, right? But now it says the animal shelter has a greatest need. And let's just quickly see which one is going to be correct. Okay? I'm going to choose one. I'm only going to choose one. So, greater. Reason being for greater, right, is because it's one animal shelter, right? And they're comparing the dog beds to the cat beds, right? But they are not specifying, they're not going, they're not, it's not more than it's basically not more than it's not more than, let's say, it's not the dogs are not being compared to all the other animals in the shelter. It's only the dog beds compared to the cat beds that they are looking for. And usually if we use the word a, right, then a would specify greater, the would be greatest, right? So option one was correct. Well done. All right. The knight easily won the battle because his sword was, do we say his sword was longest than his enemy, or his sword was longer than his enemies? So do we say longest or longer? No, don't say sorry. Remember, we are trying and we are learning. All right. So, do we say the knight easily won the battle because his sword was longest than his enemies or longer than his enemies? All right, so if we choose the correct one, and then we'll choose longer because they are only comparing the knight, right, to his enemies, right? They're not saying enemies with an IES to refer to more than one enemy. They're only saying his enemy. It's like they're saying Prians, right? With an apostrophe S. So it's referring to one enemy. Well done. So longer because that is a comparative adjective. Then Kaya sells the, do we say Kaya sells the freshest carrots in the whole city of Lakeside? Or Kaya sells the fresher carrots in the whole city of Lakeside? We are now comparing Kaya's carrots, right? Or and how fresh it is to the whole city in Lakeside. So is that a superlative adjective that ends in est, or is that a comparative adjective that ends in er? So is it the freshest carrots or the fresher carrots? All right, so we can say Kaya sells the freshest carrots in the whole city of Lakeside. So well done. All right, so now we're going to use adjectives with more and most, right? Yes, is it Ryle or Rail? What's your name? Ryle? We did this already, but remember I said this is a continuation of adjectives that compare, right? Because in our previous lesson, we did two of our lessons, which was to use adjectives as well as the other one. So now we are mainly focusing on also on adjectives with more and most. Because remember, we do adjective that compare, we do a specific chapter, and then there's probably in one lesson we do one or two lessons, and then we still continue maybe in the next session, right? All right. So now, also when it comes to comparative as well as superlative adjectives, right? Then remember we said with the comparative adjective, we compare two people, places, or things, and they end in er. And we have superlative adjectives, right, that compares more than two people, places, thing, or things, right? And they end in est. But so basically, if an adjective, right, has one syllable, if it has a one syllable adjective, right, like for example, tall or short or quick, right? Remember, we usually take two fingers and tap it on our hand for a syllable, all right? So if it has like one syllable in that specific word, like tall, for example, short, quick, right? And then either a comparative adjective ends in er or a superlative adjective ends in est, right? And here we have an example of that: tall, taller, tallest, right? But now if we have an adjective that has more than one syllable, right, we either add more to make the comparative adjective or we add most to make the superlative adjective, right? For example, intelligent, right? So intelligent, right, has got four syllables, right? So if you say that, oh, Prayan is an intelligent person, and then instead of saying, if we're comparing his intelligence to maybe B Funk's um how clever or how intelligent they are, then we maybe gonna say that maybe Prayan or Bfunk or someone, just this is just an example, right? Is more intelligent. If we're comparing the two of them, we can say that the one is more intelligent than the other one, right? If we compare somebody to the rest of the class or the rest of the group, right? And then we can say that this person is the most intelligent compared to the rest of the learners, right? So this is now also how we show comparative adjective, but by adding more if there's two or more syllables. And superlative adjective, right? We add most to our adjective, right? If there is also two or more syllables. All right, do we understand before I continue? All right. So before we go to our test, let us quickly do an activity. It says the animal shelter has a great need for dog beds than cat beds. Are we going to say that the animal shelter has a greater need? Or do we say the animal shelter has a greatest need? Or do we say the animal shelter has a more great need or most great need? What is the correct um what is the correct adjective over here? Remember, if our adjective, right, like for example, great, has one syllable, right, then we either show the comparative or the superlative adjective by adding er or est, right? If that specific adjective has more than one syllable, then we add more in front of that word for comparative adjective or most in front of the word to show the superlative adjective. All right, and if we were to select the correct one, right, we will say that the animal shelter has a greater need, that one is wrong, for dog beds than for cat beds. So well done. Greater is correct, right? Let's do two more. I know that Susan is a bit smart than I am. So Susan is being compared to how Susan is compared to me, right? For example, so do we say that Susan is a bit smarter than I am, or Susan is a bit smartest than I am? Smarter or smartest than I am? All right, and if we select the correct adjective, right, then we can say that Susan is a bit smarter than I am, and this is a comparative adjective. All right, let's do the last one before we go to our test. Going out to the movies is expensive than watching one at home. Expensive. So are we going to say going out to the movies is more expensive than watching it at home? Or do we say it is most expensive than watching one at home? So do we say it is more expensive because it's comparative? Or do we say it is most expensive because it is superlative? All right, so we can then say going out to the movies is more expensive than watching one at home. And as you can see, we added either more or most in front of the adjective, right? Because expensive has got more than one syllable, right? So with the comparative adjective, we add more, and the superlative adjective, we add most in front of that word. So now we're going on to our test. We finish at 45. All right, so we're going to complete the sentence with the correct comparative or superlative adjective, right? And our adjective is beautiful. That is like three syllables, beautiful, right? So which means that we're either going to add more or most in front of our adjective to show either comparative or to show a superlative adjective. The angelfish is the, do we say it is the more beautiful fish in the aquarium at school, or it is the most beautiful fish in the aquarium at school? Unfortunately, I cannot end earlier. I need to teach till the last 45 minutes. Just 3 more minutes, almost there. So we will say the angelfish is the most beautiful fish in the aquarium at school because we are comparing the angelfish to literally all of the other fish in the aquarium at school. So that is a superlative adjective. So well done. Most beautiful is correct. Option 2 is correct. Father chimpanzee was, do we say he was strong or stronger than mother chimpanzee? He was strong or stronger than mother chimpanzee. We are just comparing two people, comparing the father chimpanzee to the mother chimpanzee. All right, and if we were to select the correct one, we will say he was stronger than mother chimpanzee because we are comparing. It's a comparative adjective. So well done. Our dog Dusty. Our dog Dusty has the, do we say he has the most insistent bark of all the dogs in the block? We are comparing him to all the other dogs on the block, which is superlative. Or do we say our dog Dusty has the insistent bark of all the dogs on our block? So do we say most insistent or just insistent? And we are comparing him to all the other dogs on our block. So this is a superlative adjective. All right, so we will go with option one. So well done. Option one is correct. It is the most insistent bark. All right, one more. The new house on our block is the, do we say it is modern one I've ever seen, or it is the most modern one I have ever seen? It is the modern one I've seen, or the most modern one I have seen. Number one or number two? Option one or option two? Modern or most modern? All right, so we will choose our correct one and we'll say it is the most modern one I've ever seen. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson, grade 4. Thank you very much for joining our class. We see that this is adjectives that compare, right? And when we compare adjectives, right, then we either use comparative adjectives or we use superlative adjectives. Comparative adjectives compare two people, places, or things. And a superlative adjective compares more than two people, places, or things, right? If we have one syllable, our comparative adjective ends in ER, and our superlative adjective ends in EST. And if we have more than one syllable, then our comparative adjective ends in more, starts with more and our adjective, and a superlative adjective then has most in front of the adjective. All right, so that is the end of our lesson. Thank you very much. You should have a good evening further. Goodbye. You can remember this is live, Mrs. Rose. Rose, this is a live class, which means that once I end the class, you can always go back and you can re-watch the live YouTube video again, right? All right. Bye.